Hey guys, Yips here coming with another video, and this one's going to be a Maw of Souls plus 21 Pug DPS commentary. So just kind of going to go through, each pull of the dungeon, talk about what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, what sort of cool tricks maybe and tips you can learn from me doing this Maw of Souls runs, and maybe you guys can improve on that in the future. So let's just, get right into this and do the do. So I asked this group previously before we started the dungeon the way that they were going to pull it, and they said they were going to do the first mob with the birds, and then we're going to do both packs. So I am running a Sow the Seeds talent build this dungeon, as it's really important not only for the trash, but also it is very important to be running this for the second boss, as you will see in the future. So if you didn't know, you can skip these two mobs just by running up here. The rogue does not need to sap. You can just run up here and you will not take aggro from those mobs. So I guess this group here, the plan is we're going to do the birds. And then after the birds, we're going to go ahead and do this guy, and then we're going to do a double pull. So, just doing the regular things, getting my Seed of Corruptions out, making sure I'm keeping my life tap up. Something kind of cool you can do as a lock is if ever there's a mob and you get bursting, you can just drain it to heal yourself up through it. I've healed myself through 16 stacks of bursting, no problem with shield wall, so you can manage quite a bit of stacks as a warlock just on your own with drained soul. So right now, I'm just thinking about the next two trash pulls. Here, I'm just spending a lot of shards because I'm running Soul Conduit, it's Mythic Plus, you can use a lot of your resources, but I'm thinking about how I'm going to be DPSing this next pull. So I want to make sure that I have Reap available, I want to make sure that I have a good shard count available, because I'm going to be spamming the crap out of Sow the Seeds, and if I do not have shards and Reap for it, my damage is going to be very bad. So you can see here, max shards, max Reap, max everything. I put my AoE gear on, precast the Seed on this pack, throw out an Agony, cast another Seed, and now proccing Safus and only focusing on getting Agonies out. Agony is actually a big portion of your DPS when it comes to AoE. You may not think that it actually does a lot, but in the end, having like 5 or 6 15 stack Agonies, especially if you're not shard capping, really do add up. So just making sure you have those Agonies rolling, getting the precasted Seeds out there really does help quite a bit, and you can see you can just really throw out a lot of damage very quickly. So after this pull, you're going to be going on to the next boss. So I'm going to stop using my Reap now because I'm going to have to make sure that I do have Reap available for the next boss. So here I have 5 stacks, which is good enough. Go ahead and change to your single target gear. The biggest thing I'll notice about people that do this first, pull in Maw of Souls is a lot of times they won't precast Seed, and that's a really big deal. Getting your corruptions out early is such a huge DPS gain, especially when it comes to that many mobs. A lot of warlocks will just agony, and then start casting Seeds, and you really want to precast those Seeds and get them out quickly, because if you don't, your damage is going to be very poor. I actually didn't get a chance to change my gear. That's not good. Oh well, it's okay. So anyways, on this boss, there's some really cool things that you can do. I can show you them during this dungeon, even though it's not entirely necessary. So this boss has an energy bar here, and every time this energy bar reaches 100, he casts an ability called Dark Slash, and you can actually deal with the Dark Slash mechanic as a warlock. So if ever you're running with a tank that's not so comfortable in a Mythic Plus dungeon, and he's having problems dealing with the Dark Slash, you can take it for him. And the way that you do it is you have an Infernal Pet, and you keep the Infernal Pet at your side, and when the boss gets to 87 energy, you taunt the boss. So I'm going to show you here. The boss is at 53. 67, 73, 80, 87. I'm going to go ahead and taunt the boss. It targets my pet. He'll cast Dark Slash on my pet. My pet will die, and the tank does not have to deal with the mechanic. So if you ever are in a group that is having a hard time dealing with the Dark Slash mechanic, just keep that Infernal out. Every time he dies, resummon him, and then at 87 energy, just taunt. Really easy, really straightforward way to deal with that, okay? So that's kind of a really cool tip in here, just on Yimmerian. Aside from that, just make sure you're AoEing down those adds as quickly as possible, as they do a lot of damage to the tank. They do not cause bursting, so don't worry about that. So, looking forward to the next part of the dungeon, I have 45 seconds of Reap left. I do not need to continue Reap souling throughout the rest of this boss fight. I will be more than happy to wait until we get under. Now, I truly believe that in Maw of Souls, when you're doing like 4 to 5 target pulls, even though you are going to be spamming Sow the Seeds, having a decent amount of mastery is actually pretty important, because a lot of the times you're not actually going to be able to target every single mob with Seed. So instead of running a super high haste build, I tend to run a little bit more mastery oriented, still running 38% haste, which is quite high, but again, focusing a little bit more on the mastery here, because a lot of the times the mobs, they teleport, they don't group up nicely, and a lot of the times that mobs have more health than one another, so it ends up helping you in order to do more effective DPS rather than overall DPS. So you see the Swift Blades port away, and you're not able to get the seed explosions on them when they're stacked up together. So make sure that you're running a little bit of a higher mastery build when it comes to AoEing down these targets, rather than running a more haste-focused build with the chest. I truly think it's better in Maw of Souls, especially because of the health pool difference on some of the mobs. You're actually going to end up casting quite a few unstable afflictions, and obviously if you don't have mastery, you're not going to be able to benefit from that. Depending on the level of Keystone, we're about to come up to a dog pull. And depending on the level of Keystone on the dog pull, you may want to be in melee range of the dogs. The dogs will not pounce you if you are in melee range in them. So basically what happens is the tank will pull, you run into melee range, and then when they pounce, you follow them. This just makes it so you don't die on the dog pull. You are a clothy, so even though warlocks, you know, are known to be tanky classes, any sort of hard hitting physical ability can really screw you over. So make sure that, you know, if you know it's going to kill you, to be aware of that. Now, something really cool on the Swift Blades, you know how they have that annoying deflect thing? You can actually pull at your Infernal and dispel it. So if you didn't know that, you see this sea legs. I just dispelled the one off the last guy, but you can actually use your torch magic to remove that. It does have a miss chance, so sometimes it does fail, but it is worth doing because obviously 50% chance to be dodged is not a good thing to be, you know, focusing on as a warlock. So here we're coming up to the doggo pull. I'm just going to make sure that I'm in melee range for them. So I'm going to precast a seed, run into melee, stun with my pet, pop it with an agony, and make sure I do not die on this pull here. So I'm going to precast the seed here. Agony, agony, stun. Stay in melee range. They will not pounce me here because the other people will be further ahead. You follow them like this, and then they won't pounce you again. The only thing you have to worry about here is the bursting stacks. Usually it's not too big of a deal because healers are, you know, quite geared nowadays. They're able to deal with this mechanic, but obviously, you know, with the quaking, it can be quite rough. There's Hellstone here. So the next pull is going to be the Mariner. Some groups do elect to skip the Mariner, and the reason they elect to skip the Mariner obviously is quite difficult to deal with on a fortified level. Plus, he's just not worth your time. You know, the more geared you are, the more mobs you want to pull. So really focusing on single targeting down a mob is not an effective way of doing damage. But often in pugs, you know, you will end up focusing the Mariner. Just make sure every time you cast the Lantern that you're drain souling. Make sure every time that he casts it, you have Reap available and you're drain souling. A really big way of kind of dealing with that is make sure that you just cast Unstable Afflictions before he does his Lantern. And then when he does his Lantern, you already have the damage rolling and you're just drain soul healing yourself like this. And you see I'm just completely topped, no problem at all. And make sure you're focusing him instead of other mobs. Now, the next thing that I'm thinking about this dungeon is Harboron. Now, Harboron is quite a difficult boss to deal with as a ranged DPS. There's a lot of movement. I'm going to give you guys like my kind of tip on how to deal with him. I just never stop looking at the boss, really. I'm always just looking at the boss's position, regardless if an ad spawns or not. The reason being is I just find if I'm constantly looking at the boss, I have a much higher probability of not dying to the scythes randomly. And you don't really need to focus that much on when you DPS the ads. Obviously, I'll talk about more when we get there, but yeah, I'm just going to make sure I'm proccing my Safus on these champions here. So just going about the regular old business in terms of the deeps here. Do have an interrupt available when if I need it on one of these guys. It's good to interrupt these guys just to proc your Sefus. And Sefus is also the Bis legendary on the next boss, so make sure you have that equipped if you do wear it. Now, if I was in a Maw of Souls and it was not fortified, I would be tempted to run a more single target oriented build. The only problem with that is on Harboron, whenever he casts the thing that stuns the player and spawns 4 ads, you literally have 0 damage to deal with as an Affliction Warlock if you're not running Sow the Seeds. So I just think Sow is just a safe pick no matter what the difficulty is in Maw of Souls, just because of this boss here, and I'm going to show you guys what I mean when we get here. So, Harboron. Make sure your eyes are always on this guy and you will never die. That is trademarked. Keep your eyes on the Harboron and you won't die. So I'm going to make sure I'm trying to proc my Safus every time that is available to me. Really, really, really important that you do that. Making sure you stack on the boss as much as possible as well in order to spawn the ranged ad as close as possible here. So here comes the ad, but I'm keeping my eyes on Harboron. I'm dotting the ad with my eyes on Harboron. There's the scythe. They kick instead of me, so I don't get to proc my Safus here. So the fragment, this is what I'm talking about. You would have literally no damage to these ads if you were not running a Sow build. So really, really important here that you are running a Sow the Seeds build for this sort of a dungeon, or this sort of a boss, sorry. Because, you know, if I wasn't able to AoE that down and the Boomkin didn't have a defensive, he would just die, you know. My dots are not enough to kill them. Quickly, that is. They are enough to kill them, just not quickly. So there, I proc my Safus. Gonna go ahead and drain that guy for additional shard, making sure I'm moving out of that. Kind of boxed in here a little bit. Just gonna go ahead and wiggle on out over here. So this position is really bad for the tank to be tanking him in, because if I get fragmented, I actually have no way of getting over there. So there's the fragment on the rogue. He does cloak it, so that C was a little bit of unnecessary. But you do see every time that he casts that fragment, I'm instantly pre-casting a seed in order to deal with that mechanic. Again, here's the ads, so we're just going to go ahead and kick that. And just making sure we're keeping our eyes and our unstable afflictions on the boss. And we should be good. Make sure we dodge this. So this fight is actually a really good fight for Affliction. If you're able to handle all the movement and you're able to cast a crap ton of unstable afflictions, which you should be able to because your shard gen will be really high due to the amount of ads, as well as, you know, just having that Wrath of Consumption every single time he does the fragment, your DPS will actually be really, really good on this boss fight, regardless of what you're wearing. Like what sort of gear you have. Okay, so next pull. It just depends how the group does it. Generally speaking, I like to run this gear just because I do not know how groups do their pulls. Sometimes in this position, you might want to equip the slow ring if your tank tends on doing a really, really big pull, or you might even want to have on the chest if you're AoEing heavily and you're doing a big pull and your tank feels pretty safe. I do, however, recommend you keep your interrupt pet out. Just because the mist menders, you want to interrupt their casts. You don't want to let them get heals off. And if you do need to proc your Safus, you can just cast a fear on the Swift Blades. They are fearable. So we're going to go ahead and interrupt that Torrent of Souls. Here because there's Surging Waters, which would also be good. It does get stunned there. And we're just going to be spamming seeds. Really, really easy. Just make sure you get your agonies out quickly. Again, make sure you have the interrupt pet out on this pulls. Anytime there's the mist callers, you want to make sure you're having your interrupt pet out. Unless your group, you know, specifically wants you to have the stun, I just recommend having Doomguard. It is a DPS loss, but it is a survivability gain. So we're just doing the same pull again, so I'm just going to do the exact same thing. Keeping my agonies and stuff, and just going to be casting. Saving my interrupts if ever I see one of the mist callers casting something. Really, really important that you interrupt them. I don't have an interrupt for that girl, which is fine. So the main reason you're going to see your DPS being a little bit lower than other classes in Maw is every mob has such high HP. Often in other dungeons, you're able to, you know, have some pulls where there's little trash fodder. So for example, like in DHT, right, between Oakheart and the next boss, there's those little slimes that give you a bunch of reap and damage. In Vault of the Wardens, there's those little fire mobs that give you all your reap and damage. In Maw of Souls, it's all just big mob pulls, which obviously, you know, isn't terrible for an Affliction Warlock, but the problem comes is sometimes you will find yourself running out of reap if the pulls are super extended, because you do not generate 100% reap up time on your own, just by dealing damage on average, I would say. So make sure that you're aware of that and you do use your reap souls, you know, appropriately. Don't just be spamming it every pull. Make sure, you know, when the mobs are starting to get low on HP, be aware that you're about to enter another trash pull with more mobs, and that you want to have reap for them because they will be living an extremely long period of time. So you see here, I have, you know, 5 seconds left on this reap stack. It's not worth me pressing reap again. All of these mobs are going to die very quickly, and I would just be wasting this 2 stack. It's better for me to save this for the next sort of a trash pull. And again, I'm running the higher mastery build in this dungeon. I truly think it's better just because of the HP of the mobs, as well as the fact that a lot of the times you will be forced to cast unstable afflictions. For example, this double pull right here. So the Soul Keeper and the Swift Blade, it's a 2-target pull. So again, mastery build, super, super useful. Gonna go ahead and proc Fuse on the Swift Blade. And, you know, the Swift Blades, every time they port away, you lose so much value from Sow the Seeds. So really needs to hit at least, I would say, at the very least 3 targets in order to be viable. And whenever these Swift Blades port away, they are no longer a target for your seed to not only go on, but also for your seeds to explode onto. So, you know, that's a big damage loss. So obviously, every time they're stacked together, I'm going to be casting seeds, and then as soon as they spread out, I will cast my Unstable Affliction. Now, it's also important to note that if you ever, as an Affliction lock, see one mob that is higher health than other mobs in a Mythic Plus, really make sure that you focus it down. I'm going to show you, this is probably the most clear-cut example right up here with Skull, but it really applies to any mythic dungeon. Anytime you see a mob that will take a long time to kill, focus it down as an affliction lock. Your single target priority damage with adds available is one of the highest in the game. So if there's a mob that's going to be surviving a particularly long period of time relative to the other mobs, make sure that you're focusing him down. So see here, all these skeletons, completely ignore them. Treat them as things in order for you to generate shards off of, nothing more. Do not cast Seed of Corruption on this pole unless you are getting overrun by ads. If you are getting overrun by ads, you should, because, you know, they will kill you. But treat these ads as shard generation. I have to dodge this here. Treat these ads as shard gen in order to kill the mini boss, okay? And use this in every Mythic Plus. There's usually one mob that is going to be, you know, higher HP than the others. Another good example is like Blackrook Hold, the Commanders, sort of stuff like that. Really, really, really important that you you target them down rather than focus on mass AoEing, especially towards the end of the pull, because other classes in your group do not have this crazy ability where they can, you know, focus down a mob just like I did there. So if we look at the Boomkin's damage that pull, right? He only did 76 million damage to the mini boss. If you look at my damage, I did 136 million. That's double the Boomkin's damage on the mini boss, right? And the mini boss is what needs to die. When the mini boss dies, you phase into Helya. The skeletons are just trash fodder, right? So as an affliction lock, make sure you're focusing down priority mobs. It's really, really important to do, regardless of the talent spec that you're running, okay? So here, we're going to be going in on Helya. You do not want to spam seeds on these 3 tentacles. You just want to do 1 precast in order to get your initial corruptions out. And then from there, you're going to just be using your unstable affliction. So here, pop my berserking. It is important to focus down the destructor, but I find with a lot of groups, the first destructor tentacle dies extremely quickly. And since it dies so fast, I tend to prefer casting my unstable afflictions on the grasping tentacles just because I will get much, much, much more value out of them. Also, another really important tip, stand on these bones when you're fighting against Helya. The reason you want to stand on these bones is because you see these little holes in the ground. They cannot spawn on these bones. So really, really important there that you make sure that you're doing that. These things cannot happen here. So if you stand here, you will never, ever, ever get hit by those bones. Really, really, really important. Or sorry, by the holes in the ground and the tentacles coming out. Anyways, we're about to proc Helya. I think we need to kill 2 more tentacles. So as soon as these graspings die here, Helya will come down. Now, the only thing that I can really say about Helya here is make sure you're proccing your Safus and just standing in a safe location. The safe location being on these bones again. So every single time I fight Helya, I just choose one side, I stand on it. If she does a breath, I just, you know, book it on over to the other side very quickly. No big deal. So Helya's about to spawn. And yeah, I mean, Maw of Souls I don't think is the best dungeon for affliction locks. I think it's okay. It's definitely a better dungeon for classes like Boomkins or, you know, just any sort of class that really benefits from long surviving health monsters. So basically big elite packs. And Affliction, you know, does do well on those, but the fact that the Maw of Souls, you know, elite packs, they don't group up nicely. There's no small trash mobs to really proc your Soul Flame and Wrath of Consumption mid-pull, and also to generate you extra Reap does limit Affliction's capability just a little bit, which is why, you know, if that second boss wasn't in here and so the seeds wasn't so important for him, I would run a dot build instead of the build I'm currently running right now. Either way, Helya is getting oninated right now. And Affliction is pretty good on Helya, I will say that. Affliction does do quite a bit of damage. Make sure you're not running Execute, though, on Helya. She can't go and Execute. But you see here, 100% safe on these bones. They're the absolute best place to stand. Make sure that you're proccing that Safuz whenever you can. I just tried to get it there, but the group stole my interrupt, which is fine. No big deal. Another torrent coming out. Hopefully it doesn't go off. Here's a breath. Make sure we just run over to the other side, all the way over. Don't cheat. The best place to stand is on these bones. I promise, I'm not lying to you. And make sure you save your Reap and stuff when she goes down, right? Make sure you don't throw that away. Don't press it when she's about to go down, and you can have it active for when she comes back up. But either way, guys, yeah, this has been Maw of Souls. I'm sure there's probably 1 or 2 things I missed in this dungeon. If you notice them, make sure to include that in the comment section down below so other people can know about them for Maw of Souls. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed this dungeon with me. I think it was pretty fun to commentate over. I want to get more of these dungeon guides out. I do enjoy doing them. The only hard part is I have to kind of do it all at once while I'm doing it, and I have to get into a group that's not going to, totally fail the dungeon and then release it. So sometimes it's a little bit awkward, but I would love to get some dungeon guides out there, especially for a dungeon maybe like Eye of Ashara. I think could be really fun. There's a lot of cool stuff in there you can do as a warlock. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do in Blackrock Hold. There's a lot of cheesy things you can do with the slow ring. There used to be stuff you could do with Portal, but they removed it from the game, unfortunately. But there's just a lot of cool, unique utility stuff as a warlock that you can do aside from DPS. Like, for example, on the first boss, remember the pet taunt on the Dark Slash? That's really, really overpowered and definitely underused by a lot of warlocks. So I do recommend you guys kind of pick up on that sort of stuff. So anyways, this has been Yippo. Really quickly before I go, I'm just going to go ahead and show you my gear setups. So you guys can just, know what I was using. So here is my mastery-oriented gear that I was using through most of the dungeon, inclusive Foos, Hood of the Eternal Disdain. I am using 4-piece with Norgan's Prowess and Unstable Arcana Crystal. My AoE gear setup, which you saw I used at the big pull at the start of the dungeon, I was using Master Harvester, Sifus with Prototype, okay? So this has been Yips, guys. This has been a Maw of Souls 21 pug run. These guys were from the LFG Finder, so hopefully you guys can, take what you've learned today, apply it to your own skill, and let me know what you think about my transmog. I just made this today on stream. Let me know what you guys think about this. I think I look pretty fucking good. If I turn into a butt elf, dude, I'm fucking fire, eh? Yeah, I look pretty fucking hot. All right, anyways, thanks for watching, guys. I'll see y'all later. Have a good one.